Okay, today we're going to be looking at the location thread of the mathematics, geometry and measurement strand in the sequence of content from the Australian curriculum. We're looking at Year 5, and the content description is use a grid reference system to describe locations, describe routes using landmarks and directional language. So, what we've got here is a map of Australia. We have been looking at maps before. We have discussed that on a map, usually you have your directions. So you've got north usually at the top of the map, south at the bottom, west to the left and east to the right. So just looking quickly at the map, from what we know, what we've done before, we could say, for example, that Brisbane here is located on the east coast of Australia, and we can say that Perth, on the other hand, is on the west coast. Darwin is up the north, and we've got Adelaide and Hobart down the south here. What's new today with this map is the grid system. So you can see these thin black lines across the whole map. That is called a grid system, and you can also see up the top here we've got letters A through H, and at the left side here we've got numbers 1 through 8. Now these letters, they actually are meant to correspond with each column underneath. So you've got column A, column B, column C, column D in the grid system. And the numbers, they are corresponding with the rows formed by the grid system. So you've got row 1, row 2, row 3, and so on. So this grid system with the references here are very handy to use to locate things on the map. So for example, if I wanted to tell you where to look on the map to find Darwin, I could tell you to look in the box that would correspond with the reference points D2. So if you find D and 2, travel down along the D column and across from in the row for 2. Where they come together, where they intersect, that's box D2, and that's where you find Darwin. So who can tell me where our own city of Brisbane is located using the grid system with the references that we have for this grid system? Great. So you found Brisbane, you know Brisbane's over here, so, and you were able to say that Brisbane is located in this box, which is represented by H, column H, and row 5. So we can say that on this map, Brisbane is located at H5. And what about Kalgoorlie? Excellent. Susan, you found Kalgoorlie, and it's in this box here, which is box B5. Even though Kalgoorlie is right down the corner there, it's still within this box, so we can still say B5 to find Kalgoorlie. Great. So who here in the class has got friends or relatives in Melbourne? Yeah, Peter, have you been to Melbourne? And how did you travel there? By car or by plane? You flew, and that took about, how long did that take? About 2 hours, couple of hours, yeah? So we know that planes travel really fast, a lot faster than cars, right? So if it takes a plane 2 hours to travel, that's a fair distance. That's a lot longer than what you would travel in a car for 2 hours, right? Peter, do you know exactly the distance between Brisbane and Melbourne? The flight path? Okay, that's something we can find out using this map. So what we need to do is use the scale provided. Now on this map, the scale is down here, and it's giving us distance in kilometers and miles. But for this lesson, we're only going to be using kilometers. So this scale here is telling us that on the map, a distance of 200 kilometers is that far from that marker at 0 to the marker at 200. That on the map is 200 kilometers. We can see where 400 kilometers is and 600 kilometers. So what we need now is a tool we can use to actually help us measure on the map the distance between Brisbane and Melbourne. What we can use is a simple ruler. We've used rulers before. This is a ruler showing centimeters. So if I place that ruler against the scale provided on the map, I see that the 2 centimeter marker on the ruler corresponds approximately with the 600 kilometer marker on the map, on the scale of the map. So that means that 2 centimeters on the ruler is approximately 600 kilometers on the map. That also means that 1 centimeter, which is half of 2, is about 300 kilometers. We can see that because the 1 centimeter marker on the ruler is located right between the 200 and 400 markers on the scale. So that's great. We now know that each centimeter on the ruler is approximately 300 kilometers on the map. So if I then place my ruler against the map, so we can see here, if we read the legend here of the map, we've got stars that represent administrative capitals. So that star over there is Melbourne, and that star over there is Brisbane. If I place my ruler against Melbourne and Brisbane there, what I can do is go this way. Perhaps, nope, it's easier this way. So between Melbourne and Brisbane, I have got 4 centimeters on the ruler. So we know from the scale that each centimeter on the ruler is approximately 300 kilometers. So that means that we can now take our 4 centimeters between Brisbane and Melbourne and multiply that by 300 kilometers. And that will give us the approximate distance between Brisbane and Melbourne. So we had 4 centimeters, multiply by our 300 kilometers from the scale, that gives us 1,200 kilometers, 1,200 kilometers. So we now know that the distance between Brisbane and Melbourne is 1,200 kilometers. Now, it is important to remember when we're looking at distances measured on a map like this that we are measuring the straight flight path. So if you travel by car, you'd be traveling along the wonky roads, and that's probably going to be a fair bit longer than the straight flight paths. But we're going to keep measuring flight paths in this lesson. So we have now determined the distance, the straight flight path distance between Brisbane and Melbourne as 1,200 kilometers. What about direction? Remember we had the north, east, south, west direction. So if you wanted to tell somebody where Melbourne was located in relation to Brisbane, how could you say that using the distance that we've calculated and the directions as well? Jack, great. So you would say that Melbourne is located 1,200 kilometres south of Brisbane. That's great. It is south, but it's not actually straight south because that would end up somewhere down here in the sea. It's actually over to the side a little bit. So if we wanted to be more precise, Betty, you would say Melbourne is located 1,200 kilometres southwest. Excellent, because we're travelling actually diagonally, so that's south and a bit west as well. So you would say Melbourne is located 1,200 kilometres southwest of Brisbane. Fantastic. So who has got friends or relatives in Perth? Oh, excellent. So Lisa, you've got your granny in Perth. Have you flown to Perth? Yeah? Took about 6 hours. So that's about 3 times as far as from Brisbane to Melbourne, right? If Brisbane to Melbourne takes about 2 hours to fly, Brisbane to Perth takes about 6 hours. That's about 3 times as far. So let's use our ruler again to measure the actual distance. So we know, remember, each centimetre on the ruler is about 300 kilometres. We know that from the legend. We can see here, oops, there's Perth, that from Perth to Brisbane, we have got 11 centimetres on the ruler. So it's, if each centimetre is 300 kilometres, we can use our calculation. 11 centimetres times 300 kilometres gives us a distance of 3,300 kilometres from Brisbane to Perth. And what about direction? Lisa, how would you say, how would you explain to someone using the distance calculated and direction where your granny lives in Perth in relation to you in Brisbane? Great. So you could say your granny in Perth lives 3,300 kilometres west of Brisbane, your house in Brisbane, yeah? Fantastic.